Hey everyone, before we begin this week's episode, I'd like to ask you all a shameless favor. If you could take a minute to rate the podcast 5 stars on iTunes and leave a review, it would really help us get the word out about the show and help others find it. We'd also like to invite you to join the conversation. If you have a topic that you would like us to cover, send us an email at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can either write in or record your suggestion. Either way is fine. Who knows? You may be featured on an upcoming episode. Now, on with the show.
The Queen's Jewish Link presents the Jewish Living Podcast, the show that examines the many facets of Orthodox Jewish life. Here's your host, Izzo Zwirin.
If I were to say the words, the president, you would automatically think of the President of the United States. The garden is synonymous with Madison Square Garden. There are some words that are so synonymous with one icon that just adding the word the before it makes it obvious what you're talking about. The Siyum is one of those things. Many people can make a Siyum, but when you talk about the Siyum, you can only be talking about one thing. The yomi Siyum HaShas that takes place once every 7.5 years or so. This week on the Jewish Living Podcast, we get you ready for the Siyum with the man in charge.
My name is Labish Becker, and I am the Executive Director of Agudath Israel of America.
Rabbi Becker will share the history of the Daf Yomi and how we got to where we are today, selling out a 90,000-seat stadium to exclusively Jews. But we'll go much deeper than that. We'll discuss the program that awaits, the effects of an open-air stadium in January in New York, and security concerns that one may have with such a large gathering. Rabbi Becker, thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background? How did you become the executive director of the Agudath?
So you're asking a very interesting question. Well, I grew up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. My father was a rabbi there, and I went to school in Telz Yeshiva, Chicago, and then to the Mir Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael, and then I was in Lakewood Yeshiva in New Jersey. I got married, and then my wife was a PA, physician's assistant, and her job was in New York. So we moved to New York, and I went to Kollel in New York. And when it was coming toward the end of my Kollel career, I was on a plane on the way to Milwaukee to visit my parents. We were going there for Pesach. And it was very interesting because very unusual for those days. This was 1979. There was like a middle-aged man who was on the plane, and he asked me to come over and schmooze with him a little bit, a frum man. And I asked him, "What are you doing on the plane?" And he said, I'm visiting somebody who's in the hospital in Milwaukee from South America who's there for heart operation. I'm going to visit him and spend a few hours there and then go right back to New York. I said, okay, that's nice. And he says, tell me, younger man, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm kind of looking to go out. And he said, what type of thing you're looking to go into? And I said, well, maybe Kiruv, maybe Rebbe, maybe Askonis. I'm not quite sure yet what I'd like to do. So he said, okay, you seem like a fine younger man. Do me a favor, call my friend Rabbi Shmuel Bloom at the Agudath and tell him that Benny Fishoff sent you. Benny Fishoff was the chairman of the board of Agudath Israel at that time. Mm-hmm. So it was sort of a should have made in heaven. And there I was up in the plane, and I called him, and I called Rabbi Bloom as he told me to. And here I am 40 years later, just celebrating my 40th anniversary here at Agudath Israel, and it all started with that plane ride.
That's so nice. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So we're here today to talk about the upcoming Siyum HaShas, and hopefully by the time this episode airs, it'll be the week or two before the Siyum, and get people ready for what's about to happen. So I want to go through a little bit of the history of Daf Yomi and the history of the Agudath's involvement, and then talk a little bit about this year's event. So if you can give me a little bit of the history of the Daf Yomi, about when it started, what is it? Most people listening know what it is, but how did it start and how did it get to be so big?
Sure. So it started in 1923. There was a Knessia Gedola, the first Knessia Gedola of Agudath Israel, which was many thousands of people came from all over the world. You had people from Germany and from Russia and from Poland, basically everywhere in Europe. And Meir Shapiro, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, at that time he was actually a young Rav. He was in his early 30s, believe it or not. Came up with the idea, along with others, of learning a daf a day. And his compelling argument is that if a Jew, he gave an example. He said that if you take a look at the daf of the Gemara, so it's really written by people from all over the world. If you look at Rashi, came from France. Tosos was from Germany.
The Gemara
Rif,
itself was Bavel.
and the Gemara itself is Bavel, right? And the Mishnah is from Eretz Yisrael. And it's amazing. It's really an international enterprise. And he says, wouldn't it be wonderful if a person is on the same, literally daf, the same page as another person? They could all, let's say if you're traveling, and he mentioned Japan and Australia, I believe are the two places he mentioned. A Jew from New York goes to Japan, Australia, and he'll sit there and he'll learn with other people the same daf. And it's true, by the way, I've done it. If you go to other cities, you actually meet people, and it's wonderful. You walk right in, and you were instantly part of the group. You don't have to know. You just sit down, and you're the same there as anybody else because you're all literally on the same page. And what happened is because he was so young and he was going in front of this very prestigious group, and the Chafetz Chaim did something very interesting. The Chafetz Chaim, when he came to Chafetz Chaim with this idea, he said, "It's magnificent. I want you to present it, but we're going to do something interesting. I don't want you to come in at the beginning, because you're a young man, and you'll make this proposal and say, who is this young man, and you don't have the gravitas. So what you're going to do is you're going to come in late, and you're going to come in late. I'm going to stand up for you." And when he walked in and the Chafetz Chaim stood up for him, that was like a wow moment. Everyone said, "Who is this?" And immediately, whatever he said, they were listening to because they knew it was something that the Chafetz Chaim had given, the hechsher to. Mm-hmm. And he had this booming voice. He was known to have a very booming voice. Obviously, he didn't have microphones like we do, and everybody was able to hear him. And it was electrifying. They say the people, if you read any of the things, if you come with me next door, we have the archives of Agudath Israel, which you can take a look and see the newspapers. It was one of those things which instantly electrified everybody. Everybody knew this is something. But nothing happened for a while because they made up to start it in Rosh Hashanah of the following year. And, as many great proposals happened, it could have gone this way or that way.
Right.
And what happened was there's a famous incident in which the Ger Rebbe, who at that time in Europe had over 100,000 adherents, said right after davening on Rosh Hashanah at night, he said, "Bring me a brachas Gemara. I want to start the daf yomi." When the Rebbe says that, everybody went running. And of course, they probably were not anywhere near enough.
That is a
brachas
great
Gemaras. I mean, how many do you have in a shelf?
Yeah, that's a great commercial for daf yomi right there.
Exactly. So everybody went, and that really, they credit that to what kicked off yomi really off into orbit. And from that point on, and there were tens and hundreds of thousands of people learning it in Europe. There was a Siyum HaShas in 1930. And if you want, I can introduce you to Mr. Manny Pollack, who I just spoke to on the phone, who was actually there as an 8-year-old child in 1930. He's now, that makes him, I guess, 97.
Yeah.
And Baruch Hashem, he was very, he talked all about it. And it was, yes, I think he needs to be interviewed. He really has what, I'm sure, I want to be there when you interview him because it's going to be very interesting. But in 1930, and then they had another, that Rameir Shapiro himself spoke at. By the second one, he died very young, unfortunately. Rameir Shapiro died when I think he was 46. So by the second one in 1938, it had two very sad things. One is he was not alive, and everybody knew things are not going well for the Jews of Europe.
Right.
And it was under the cloud of the coming Holocaust that it happened, but there were still many people there. The next Siyum HaShas, interestingly enough, took place in 1945 in Feldafink. It took place in the DP camps in Germany. It happened after the war.
Right.
And it was one of those things that must have given such hope to the people that Klal Yisrael is going to continue because the Daf Yomi was celebrated at that time. So in Eretz Yisrael, you had that again from we're just going through it historically.
Yeah.
In 1953, there was one in 1960, which in Eretz Yisrael had large crowds. As a matter of fact, my grandfather, who was called the Ozhevaver Rebbe, Rabbi Moshe Chiel Epstein, who grew up in the Bronx, who had a shtibel in the Bronx, maybe some of your, some people know about it. He spoke at the ones in Tel Aviv. I have pictures of them at the Siyum HaShas. But in America, it was not well known. As a matter of fact, I'm told that in the Sirei Agudath Israel newspaper, they have that in 1960, Reb Aaron at an Aguda dinner Aguda convention, congratulated all those who finished the Daf Yomi. And that was the Siyum HaShas.
Wow, so we're talking about Rav Aaron Cutler, just
so
people are aware.
Yes, I'm sorry, Rav Aaron Cutler, right? Okay, exactly. I learned in Lakewood, so Rav Aaron.
Right, that's what I figured.
Yes.
I talk to a lot of people every once in a while, and they say, "Oh, the Rosh Yeshiva said, like, your Rosh Yeshiva is not
your
my
Rosh
Rosh
Yeshiva is not my." So true.
Yeah, it happens all the time.
We just sort of make the assumption that So in 1968 was the first nascent and beginnings of the rebirth and reemergence of the Daf Yomi here in America. So 1968, in the Beis Yaakov in Borough Park, they had about 300 people come to a Siyum HaShas. And they had a few already, there were beginning of 1 or 2 Daf Yomi Shurim that took place in Borough Park and the heavily, like Williamsburg, the heavily Jewish neighborhoods. But it really hadn't spread much beyond that. By 1975 already, they took the Manhattan Center, so that's when Agudath Israel really started getting involved in organizing the Shas. There was I mentioned Rabbi Becker became the founding chairman. He was a Rav in the Upper West Side, and he was also worked in rebuilding schools in Hungary. Actually, he was very involved with he was the executive director of the Lauder Foundation for many years. And he and Rabbi Borchardt worked to make a siyum where about 1,200 people came in 1975.
Wow! So the Manhattan Center, that's the first real
when it really started to move. The Daf Yomi really started to take off. 1982 is where I come in. That was my first one. I just started working here. And here I can get personal, and I can get a little bit more, more interesting, because there I was actually there. So we went to the Felt Forum, and that, if you're
in Los Angeles,
the Felt Forum here in New York,
it's
downstate. It doesn't exist anymore.
It's been gone since I was born.
Right, exactly. As they say in Yiddish, Lebschein nicht. It's no longer there. But the Felt Forum is now called, I think, the Theater at Madison Square Garden.
Yes,
and it has about 5,000 seats. So we were taking a quantum leap. From 1,200 to 5,000 is 4 times as much as you had the time before. And I remember standing with Rabbi Borchardt and Rabbi Besser, and we looking out at this gigantic hall, and we said, who's going to come? How are we going to fill this thing up? And we came up with the plan that we're going to put tarps over some of the seats, say it's under construction, so in case people don't come, they won't be embarrassed.
It's still a plan that's used today in many venues.
People
do that.
Well, that's right.
That's right.
But what happened is you see Rabbi Moshe Sher was the legendary leader of Agudath Israel for 55 years, had an idea, is right there, and he had a great idea. He said, when people go somewhere, they like to feel that they have something that says they're entitled to come in. Up till then, it's just been open admission.
Right.
So we're going to give everybody a ticket that says admit 1. I remember it was a little yellow ticket. Maybe they have one here. And they gave out, as you do with coupons, if you want 5,000 people, you give out 10,000, right? That's I guess. The problem is they all came. So we had thousands of people standing in the street waving tickets saying, what do you mean you can't let me in? I have a ticket. And they so it showed us, though, the tremendous interest in Daf Yomi, in the learning. It shows endless interest in the pride of being Jewish. It's a tremendous feeling of pride in being a Yid, that all these people are come together, l'shem shamayim. And it was an achdus, a tremendous achdus. You had all sorts of type of people coming. So that was the first one where we really started to get big. In 1990, they took another leap of faith, and they decided to go from Madison Square Garden upstairs.
Okay, the main section of the garden.
20,000 people.
Right.
Plus downstairs. So you now are going to go 5 times as many people. You're really taking a chance. And it filled up. And it really filled up. It was just an amazing thing. And that, by the way, was the first time that women started to come to the Siyum, because there really wasn't enough room. They were, it was considered a men's program. The Daf Yomi is mostly learned by men. And therefore, there was a lady who was Mrs. Schwartz, who was her husband was a Maggid Shir, and she wrote a letter to the Aguda, and she said, please open up the Siyum to women, because when the man goes to a Daf Yomi Shir at 5:15, his wife wakes up at 5 o'clock, so she can wake him up to go and make sure he goes. So we want to be there as much as the men, and they did, and they had about, because of the way it was, structured, the Madison Square Garden came, they had about 3,000 women the first year. But that's, and then now they're probably close to almost, 30-40% of the total amount of people coming. So that was 1990. In 1997, 2 things interesting happened. We're getting there.
Well, 1997 is interesting to me. This is the first one that I remember.
Is 1997.
97 is the first one that I remember originally,
okay,
yes.
Well, then it really started, because then we took NASA Coliseum as well.
Right,
so
you had 2 venues at the same time.
And that was also a technical marvel, because you had half the program one and half the program in the other.
Right.
And number 2, you did something else, is that we also started broadcasting it in those days by satellite. This was, remember, pre-internet.
Right.
So it was by satellite. We started broadcasting it to other cities around the country. So you started having Los Angeles and Chicago and Toronto, and everybody started having it. So it wasn't just anymore a New York phenomenon, which it had pretty much been before. In maybe 1990 we started doing, but 97 it really took off, and you had about 45,000 people. You were, it was going just quantum leaps, and it was a tremendous success. And there's a little bit of a side story to it. There's like a siyata d'shmaya, because initially they did not want to give us those dates that we needed because of hockey and
basketball. I would imagine, yeah.
And Hashem's hashgacha pratis is such that there were people who were involved with Agudath Israel who also had dealings with the leagues, and they were able to get them to help us out.
Wow.
In the same way that in 1990, I think it was 97, I believe, we had to buy out the circus. One year we had to buy out the circus because the Barnum Bailey Ringling Brothers Circus, and they sold it to us for one day. They gave us permission to use it for one day, and they took all the elephants, and nobody knows this, and you and I aren't allowed down there. But if you go down into Madison Square Garden, all the way underground, there's a gigantic room where they keep the animals. And you don't want to go down there for different reasons.
Well, now that circus is gone, and
the circus is gone. So I don't know what to do with the room. Maybe they made it into a chasana hall. I don't know. So 2005 already. You had we went to larger. You used again Madison Square Garden, and you did Continental Airlines Arena, and the daichik, the pressure for new seats was so great, and so many people wanted to attend that we actually rented Javits Center 10 days before, and about 8,000 people went there.
So that year I was learning in Eretz Yisrael for that year, and I went to the Siyum in Binyanei Uma.
Okay.
Or in the entrance of Yerushalayim. Very different experience, which I want to get to with how that works out. But and you can continue
while we're doing our tour through history here.
We'll get into the other the around the countries.
What happens over there?
Yeah,
that's pretty
we'll talk about that
too.
later. But let's finish up with
and
the
then
history.
in 2012 they took the biggest leap until then, and they decided they're going to go to MetLife Stadium. Now, MetLife Stadium is 92,000 seats. Now you're really talking...
And it's open air.
And it's open air. And that's right, and it's open air. So that was right. So it was less of a challenge then, but it could have rained, and which it did the day of the Siyum. Actually, it poured, and this was like almost people see as like an open nace, is that it poured. And as a matter of fact, we were trying to get the seats cleared off. We had people out there with shmatas trying to clear the seats. Didn't work. And at 7 o'clock, when it was called for, on the dot, it stopped raining. And people just like had their mouths open because it was just like, it was pouring like crazy and just stopped. So, so we're hoping for similar miracles. We'll talk about 2020.
No, 2020 at this point, right?
Is right. We're 2020. You got to remember, it's one day over.
Yes.
It's hard because we're still in 2019. But having it in the open air, it was very interesting. We were the first major event that they had in MetLife Stadium, and there was a person who built MetLife Stadium. Who gave a speech at one of our events and said that he had, when he built it, he had worked for the Tish company. He was a frum person, and he always davened that it should be used also for have a Torah Dik place that it should. And he says his tefillas were answered, and it was used for a Torah Dik event. And it's interesting because the people who worked there said they felt the sanctity in the air.
Yeah.
And one of the things that they're totally astonished by, going all the way back to the beginning, is Shemoneh Esrei. They say it's unheard of to have 20,000 or 90,000 people making no noise in a stadium. It's just like they're flummoxed, and we explained it to them.
Even when people have a moment of silence, it's not really a moment of silence.
Yeah, but that's a moment.
That's a moment. This is an extended period of time.
You got an extended period of time, and nobody's saying a word. And it's just, and it's truly been a Kiddush Hashem, and they really have. There's a tremendous rapport between they work so hard for us. We're really makatayv. The people who've worked in all these venues, and some of them have actually, there's one person who worked in Madison Square Garden, and then he moved to MetLife. So he's been with us for like 3 times, and we have such a beautiful bond, and we work together. It's just a wonderful experience because they're first of all they're extremely competent. I mean, these guys know their stuff. I mean, you're talking about broadcasting, you're talking about all sorts of technical things, and we have some very interesting needs. Let me just tell you a little bit about this Siyum, a couple of things that are very interesting that your listeners might be very interested in. And that is that the Siyum in 1975 was dedicated to the Kedoshim, to the people who perished in the Holocaust.
Mhm.
And every Siyum since then has had a mole. In other words, they make a prayer for the Kedoshim, and they speak about it, and it's one of the most moving parts of the Siyum. This time we're going to be having an entire group of Holocaust survivors. They're giving anybody who's a Holocaust survivor gets a complimentary ticket to either the MetLife Stadium or the Barclay, which we'll talk about in a minute. And we're going to be having a special part of the program that will be dedicated to them. And also we have signing for the deaf, so we have a special section for signing. We have a whole section for people who are unfortunately disabled. They shall have refuah shlema, but we're really trying our best that every single Jew who wants to be part of this experience should be able to be part of it.
That's fantastic.
So now we're there.
And we're there. But before we get there, I just want
And just one more thing before I forget.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Is that what happened is MetLife is sold out. So they opened the Barclays Center, and the Barclays Center, it's important to know, is in downtown Brooklyn. It's an indoor stadium, and they're going to have a hybrid program. So they're going to have a live band with live dancing, and some of the speeches will be live there, and other parts will be in from MetLife Stadium. So that's an opportunity, and there's still seats available. So anybody who wants to come, they're very inexpensively priced, and people are welcome to join us there.
Right, I would imagine that the point of these events is so that people would come. We don't want to price people out.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So, but you still have to pay the bills. That's
absolutely.
The tension is, I like to tell people it's a very expensive chasana.
So in terms of the Daf Yomi, obviously there's been a tremendous growth in people who attend the Siyum. What about the people who learn Daf Yomi? Do we have any statistics possibly on how many people learn?
Right. So we give out a certificate for anybody who finishes Shas, and we give out thousands and thousands of certificates. And those are the people who finish, which is probably a minority of people who learn Daf, because not everybody is, you can learn. And by the way, I would encourage anybody, just because you're only learning 500 blot in 7.5 years, or 1,000, don't not do it because of that. You're still learning that many blot. Like I had somebody who told me that they drop out every year after brachas. I said, it's magnificent. You learn brachas 5 times. That's great. But people have sort of, if I can't do it all, we encourage people to join. So there are many thousands, but not everybody learns in a shir. There are 3 different ways people learn nowadays. They learn in a shir, they learn with a chavrusa, or they learn online, and they listen to a shir, on the phone. It started on the phone, or there's other ways of listening to a shir, and there are many people learn by themselves. So it's hard to exactly estimate, but it is in the tens of thousands of people. We have a list of over about 1,200 shurim that we know of. Right. But there's other shurim that we don't necessarily know about. And one thing I can tell you, though, is the amount of shurim increases exponentially every siyum, and the amount of people increases exponentially. But I got a letter from a woman who went to a shir in 1990, and the Maggid Shir was talking about the importance of going to the Siyum HaShas. So she decided, I'm going to take my family. And they went for a few times. And in the last Siyum, her father, who had retired, he was, I don't know what he did for a living, but he was in the American Army during World War II, so he's not a young man. And he decided, I'm going to undertake to learn the Shas, because I've been to all these Siyum HaShas, I want to be part of it. And he's now in his mid-80s, and he's finishing for the first time.
Oh, wow. So
you have stories like that of people who are finishing Shas at all stages of life, and are starting at all stages of life. But what makes them do it is the Siyum. The Siyum really is, I think, people go. I was even talking to a certain Rav when I spoke for the Bada Rabbanim in Baltimore. So one of the Rabbanim told us that how to get started in his shir. He said they were driving back from the Siyum, I think in '97, the one you went to, and they're all talking to each other. They're saying, you know something, we don't want to just go to a Siyum anymore. We're tired of going to Siyum. We want to be part of the Siyum. And they started in their shul, and he says we're now finishing for the 3rd time.
Wow.
So
fantastic.
the Siyum is so powerful an experience that people come out of it and they're disappointed Mashiach didn't come. That's the intensity of the experience. But so many people start Daf Yomi because of that.
That's absolutely incredible. You mentioned a few technological advances that we've had.
Right.
I remember when I was in probably about high school time, that's when dial-a-daf started.
Oh, wow,
when
yeah.
people would call in. I think that's not in existence anymore because there's other technological things.
Well, dial it out. The Shurim, once, the nice part about Shurim, once they're recorded, they're forever.
Right.
So you can listen
But
to.
people call in, or do they just have it online available?
There are people still who call in.
Oh, wow.
There are
That's
people who still
fantastic.
call in. There are people who do it online.
There are podcasts that do
There are
that yomi?
podcasts, yes,
Yeah.
and there are, there are a number of Shurim. There's like Shas Illuminated, there's Daf HaChaim, and many others that help you actually see the daf as you're hearing the shir. You're watching the daf, and they'll have a pointer, and they'll have an illustration of something to help you understand what's going on. Lots of times, we're talking about coinage from a different era, and people don't know that there's a Rambam that says that ultimately we may not understand totally a pshat, and the answer is we weren't there. If we were there, it's so easy. Like if you would have asked me, 10 years ago, you would have said, I'm going to take an Uber or a Lyft. I would say, huh?
Right.
Make that 5 years ago. But, what I'm saying. But if you were there, it's not, to us, it's just part of our parlance.
Exactly.
It's part of our language. So in the same way, everybody, as we go forward, and the technology changes, the methods of giving over the daf change. And it's just each advance helps us, and of course there's Art Scroll.
Right. So I was going to bring up Art Scroll. I think that's the most
is a major factor, which has started in 1990, but it also started because of Siyum HaShas, and it's really been in lockstep with the Daf Yomi. So that all of the different things online, the Art Scroll, everything contributes, and each one helps a different type of a person to be able to learn the daf and make it more possible for so many people to learn the daf.
Exactly. Yeah, I was going to bring up Art Scroll because obviously the growth of Art Scroll was dependent on their Gemaras. They've been able to do a lot more since then, but it kind of worked hand in hand with the daf and how they've been able to reach a wide section of Jews that previously probably wouldn't have been able to learn daf yomi or learn Gemara at all. And now people are everywhere have been able to do it because of the Art Scroll. They help out. They had their Hebrew version. I think they had a Spanish version or a French version.
They have French now.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, I'm very proud of the fact that the Daf Yomi Commission of Agudath Israel, as I mentioned, which sponsors the Siyumim, was very helpful with Art Scroll in helping them get started. We gave them our list of all of our shurim. They had who to know where the Daf Yomi people are to advertise to. And really, so Daf Yomi and Art Scroll is a symbiotic relationship. I think the fact that the Daf Yomi people gave them the volume of people who want to buy brachas or whatever the Masechta is, and the Daf Yomi obviously helped everybody to learn better. So it really worked very well together, Baruch Hashem.
So let's talk about this year's Siyum HaShas. So
Okay.
we already mentioned that it's going to be in MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. Right. It's going to also be in Barclays Center in Brooklyn, which semi-simulcast. And there'll be speeches that are specific to Brooklyn. What about other venues throughout the country and maybe even internationally?
Okay, so let's start with the United States. So Baruch Hashem, there's about 50 cities which will be having a Siyum. Some of them are going to be having a simulcast with our Siyum on January 1st. Other cities, in addition to that, will also have their own Siyum on January 5th, which is the actual day. The Siyum itself is on Shabbos, so it'll be that day. So like Miami, Los Angeles, Chicago, Toronto, and Montreal, the cities that come to mind of the major cities, will be having a little bit later, and they're bringing speakers from all over the world are participating in these Siyumim. So, that's in terms of the United States. So, I mean, the cities like Toronto, Chicago, I mean, you can have 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people in these cities. You know, Baruch Hashem, their communities have grown tremendously as well. So they'll have it, you'll have in Cleveland and Detroit and and all the different cities, from top to bottom of the United States, really, they're all going to have a Siyum.
Right.
Nobody's going to miss out on this. As a matter of fact, I was telling somebody, this Siyum was very interesting. There's one difference. There was a big sense of FOMO on this Siyum, is that people are flying from all over the world for the Siyum in a way that I don't remember in the past, because everybody knows what the Siyum can do, and nobody wants to not be there. It's nice to watch it on in a live stream in another city, but to be there is to experience in a way that's impossible to do on screen, no matter how big the screen is. And then there's an international. So there was a conference in Geneva a couple of weeks ago of the Conference of European Rabbis, and we had a representative there who spoke about the Siyum. So we're now working on broadcasting the Siyum to places like Moscow and Kiev and Paris and London and Antwerp and Berlin and all of the other cities.
These cities don't have a big gathering point of their own?
They're going to be they'll tune into ours,
Okay.
and then they can make a gathering around it. Sometimes a lot of them, what they'll do is they'll take most of our feed, and then they'll have some local speakers.
Right, but
to
I'm
add to
assuming
it.
we're starting at 7 o'clock Eastern time.
Oh, no.
we're not.
Wait.
All right.
Ah.
All right, so we're going to
This
get
one
to
is
the date.
different. The
This one is
reason we're
different.
able to go international in a way we've never been able to. We did have in the past international. We had Hong Kong did it 7 in the morning.
Ah.
So they davened chakras, and then they had the Siyum with us. Australia's 15 hours later.
Right.
So they were okay. South Africa, Eretz Israel, the only one that used to have it really was Lublin, because they were willing to stay up till 3 in the morning, for us. But now, because the Siyum is at 1 o'clock, I didn't even mention that. This is the first Siyum that's in the afternoon. Because of the weather issue, you want to get maximum warmth
Right.
on the January 1st, so we're doing it 1 in the afternoon. So 1 in the afternoon, it's only 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock in Europe, or 10 o'clock, whatever time it is, but it's all doable. So this is the first time we're able to have a truly global and international Siyum that they can participate live. So that's going to be a really nice chiddush of the Siyum. They're going to have all these people in all these different cities participating.
So I wanted to ask about the date, the choice of the date, January 1st. You're doing it in the middle of the day. Part of that was the weather. Was part of that people are now usually going to be off that day,
Right.
and they can
idea,
make it in the middle of the
right.
day?
So number one is you don't have to worry about any use of the stadium for a football game.
Right.
It's January 1st is usually I think college. It's not they don't.
Right. It's a college day.
It's
right.
a college day. So that's number one. But the more important thing is January 1st is the day when everybody is off. There's nobody who has, not everybody. Obviously people working at the stadium aren't off, and we're not off.
Right.
But you know what I'm saying? Most people are going to be off, so it's a tremendous day to enable everybody to be able to participate.
And that's internationally. That's not just here. That's everywhere.
That's everywhere.
Yeah. The other thing that I thought about in terms of the interesting aspect of January 1st is that the 2 times in people's lives where you think, all right, I'm going to start doing something is January 1st and at the Siyum HaShas.
New Year's resolutions.
The New Year's resolution is going to be, now I'm going to start. Now, hopefully people will continue. But as you said before, if you finish brachos 5 times in your life, that's 5 times more than maybe you would have before.
That's correct. I think that's a wonderful idea. Thank you for putting that idea. I'll mention it here. It's a great idea to make a resolution to finish Shas.
Yeah, it's a very easy workout. Yeah. And we mentioned the expected attendance because you have spill out of people from. So MetLife is sold out completely now.
There's a few of the upper level seats there. There are some seats left, but it's
enough that you feel comfortable.
Right, exactly. It's filled up enough because remember, you can't wait till the last day. You have to have enough time to open it up. So it's filled up enough to get to Barclay.
And is the seating completely separate? Are there sections of mixed seating?
The seating is going to be separate seating.
Okay.
In both venues.
And is it upstairs and downstairs, or there's different sections?
There are different sections. That I'm not totally familiar with the stadium, but there are different sections. There'll be for men and for women, different sections, and obviously because they're davening, they'll have some sort of mechitza up for at least for the portion of the davening that they'll have up.
All right. So now there's basically 2 elephants in the room about this. The first one, let's take the easier one first.
Okay.
Which is January 1st, open air stadium.
Yes.
It's going to be cold.
Yes.
It's not going to be a football game where people are drinking a lot and moving a lot. You're stationary for most of the time. So what can people do to prepare aside from just wearing layers?
So it's very an interesting thing that we asked people, and we did before we took this leap. we did a little bit of customer survey, and most people, it was very interesting the reaction we got. They were a little insulted that we asked them. They said, if they can go for a football game in this weather for Torah, I shouldn't be willing to, put it up a little cold for a few hours. Like, why do you ask me this question? They actually wanted to prove their mettle.
That's right.
Look, Rebbeinu Shalom, I'm willing to sit out here in the cold for this. I want some credit.
I find that with protests, it's easy to protest in the warm weather. When it gets cold, and all of a sudden the protesters go away for some reason. The same thing here.
So we did some customer, and we found that people, were okay with that too. Is the average temperature in New York at that day is in the 40s, and I was told that if you're a meteorologist out there, you can call me up. Don't yell at me. I was told that the snow season starts January 15th in New York till March. That most snow doesn't. That January 1st is not like a day when it's usually going to snow. So in terms of the cold, there are people who have bought suites. Obviously, every stadium has suites. So those people who will obviously be able to be indoors or outdoors. Other people can go into the concourse. If it gets cold, obviously you can go inside a little bit. But most people are just going to dress warm for the weather. We'll be giving away along with the Siyum magazine and the Siyum Youth and the Nesheh Siyum, we have 3 magazines we're giving away to every single person. And along with that will be a warmer package, I think, with nose warmers and finger warmers that will help them stay warm as a gift from the Siyum during their stay. But mostly, I guess, just dress warm and hope for the good weather, which now we're getting close enough that we'll, the long-term forecast should be coming out soon, so we'll find out what the challenge will be.
Yeah, for those listening, we're recording this in the middle of December 16th. So we're only about 2 weeks away, a little bit more than 2 weeks away.
That's right. So we'll know soon. And also, there's 2 programs being planned. If the weather is not so good, we'll shorten things a little bit to make it a little bit easier.
Obviously, that wouldn't affect.
Great,
obviously, that wouldn't affect the Brooklyn.
Well, the Brooklyn,
they're indoors. Okay,
that issue will only be for the MetLife.
The other elephant in the room is going to be security. We just came off of a terrible attack in Jersey City, and even since then, I believe there was an attack at a Sephardic shul in Los Angeles. There was an attack at Indiana State University. I think people would be rightly concerned going to definitely the largest gathering of Orthodox Jews, probably the largest gathering of Jews anywhere, maybe outside of Eretz Israel. And security has to be on everybody's mind right now. So what security measures are being taken?
We've had numerous meetings with, I think, about 40 agencies, Homeland Security, the various police departments that surround the area there, with the New Jersey State Troopers, the FBI. Everybody is involved in this, and they say it's being given level 2 security, which is the level after the presidential visit. Presidential visit would be a 1, and this is being given next level. They take this extremely seriously. I would tell you 2 stories to show how the security works over there. Number 1, my friend Rabbi Golding, who's the COO of the Siyum, was driving in the parking lot, and he wasn't sure where to go, so he called the head of security there. So the head of security says, "Well, I see you're over there. Make a left turn or a right turn, and I'll tell you where to go next." And he followed him the whole way around. So they are watching everything. They are really taking this very seriously. Last time there was an interesting story that happened. There was a bus came, I think it was from Far Rockaway, a school bus. It was with adults, but it was a bus. And as the bus pulled up, it was surrounded by dogs, the sniffing dogs. And they all went crazy, yapping at the bus, pounding on the bus and yapping at it. Mm-hmm. And, of course, that brought 30 police cars with sirens over to the bus. And this bus just these regular people from Rockaway. They're thinking, what do we do? A guy gets onto the bus with a hazmat outfit, with a Geiger counter, testing for radiation. And now they're really trying to figure out what is going on here. They walked to the back of the bus, and they found some poor man, and the counter went off. It turns out that 2 weeks before, he had when they do a barium enema, they put radiation into the body.
Oh, my goodness.
He had it 2 weeks before. He'd had some sort of procedure, and the dogs still smelled the radiation from outside.
Wow.
That's how good they are. These are really professionals, and they are taking it very seriously. So I'm very comfortable and very confident that they know what they're doing, and they will keep, in Mitzvah Hashem, everybody safe.
Okay. That's an amazing story. So
True story. I didn't make it up. I couldn't make it up.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So for those who haven't been to the Siyum before, always a very important question with Jews. What could we expect for food?
That's an excellent question. So there is the stadium actually has a clear bag policy. I'm not sure. You have to look at the thesiyum.com website. Will tell you exactly how big the clear plastic bag can be and what you're allowed to put into it. How many bottles of water you're allowed and how many sandwiches. They have a whole very specific policy. Remember, we're not the only guys who come there.
Right.
There will be indoor stands where you can be able to buy some food. The suites, obviously, which are as it is by any football game, those will be having catering, but otherwise there's going to be stands there with light food. Somebody wants to buy something, sandwiches, something that probably I think they're able to bring.
Okay. So I remember, again, back to my Binyanei Uma Siyum, that the wine was free flowing. If people want to bring alcohol, is that something that people could bring?
I don't know the answer to that. That's
consult your local stadiums.
I would doubt it. Again, I don't do catering,
right.
So I don't know the answer to that one. The Siyum.com will have all those type of answers. I'd be surprised because, to be honest, they probably would like to,
To sell,
sell
yeah.
liquor is something that there's nice markup on. So I would
Yes.
imagine if I were them, I wouldn't want you bringing it in. I'd want to make the money on it.
How does the Aguda decide who gets to speak, who gets to sit on the dais, and who gets how much time?
Okay, so in terms of who gets to sit on the dais, so it's a Rabbanim day. There are 3 dei, I guess, or daises. I'm not sure to say. Okay, the first is the rabbinic dais. Those would go to Shul Rabbanim, to Rosh Yeshiva, and so on, who are given a complimentary seat to come sit on the dais. And, that's obviously the glory of the Jewish people, is there's Torah scholars. Then there's the Daf Yomi Magid Yashir. Every Daf Yomi Magid Yashir gets a free seat. And they get a free seat. They have a choice. They could sit on the dais, or the Daf Yomi Magid Yashir may wish to sit with the people they've been learning with for 7.5 years. So it's about half and half. So we do that. And then there's a VIP section where there are many politicians, heads of institutions, and so on. So those are the people who are going to be sort of on the dais. In terms of those who speak, the people who speak are the senior Rabbanim of the community are given to speak, as well as the people who are the best speakers. There's 2 parts, and there's the senior Rav who will do like the Hadran, they'll do the Haskalah, the beginning, the end, they'll do the
Kaddish.
The Kaddish, right. And then you have some, as we all know, there's some very popular speakers in the Jewish world today, and they'll be speaking.
Yes, it seems like a very straightforward way of selecting things.
Very much so.
It does present itself as a potential problem, and I think that you guys do a very good job of quelling that problem.
We try. It's I can tell you it's not easy.
I figured.
And then, of course, there'll be lots of dancing and lots of singing.
Live band.
Some of the major, people who do beautiful singing are going to be there. Anything that will sort of stir your neshama.
Any names you want to drop for who might be
I'm
there?
not able to at this
Not
time.
able to.
Yeah, that's what I was told. So I'd love to.
All right. So my last question for you, is there anything else that you would like everybody to know about
I'd like
the
to.
Siyum?
I'd like to just say that what's interesting about this Siyum is every Siyum, as I said before, sparks an incredible interest in learning, both learning Daf Yomi and really just general learning. People see the importance of the excitement of learning, and it really gets people into learning. We've started a few programs ahead of time that have really gotten people into learning, because the idea being, the old way you got somebody to come to the Siyum, when we used to tell people, there's the old story of the rabbi who was dancing on Simplest Torah, and he saw an Am Haaretz, a person not of learning, dancing, and he said, "What are you dancing with the Torah for? You don't learn Torah." He says, "My brother makes a wedding, I shouldn't come." And we'd say, so, all these people are being Messiah, you should be there.
Right.
As a matter of fact, before we open tickets to the general public, we open up to the Daf Yomi learners first, and usually sell out about half the stadium just from them and their families.
Wow.
That's how it goes. So learning the Daf is something that is exciting afterwards, but we want people to learn beforehand. So we're telling them now, even if you're not learning Daf Yomi, learn something to make a Siyum. So you make a Siyum on Masechtas Kedushin, make a Siyum Megillah, some of the lighter,
Makos,
Makos, right, some of the shorter and, easier Masechtas, you don't have to learn Yuvamis necessarily. You can if you, of course.
Please, by all means.
Yes, please. But, if you want to finish, you probably Makos or Megillah and so on. So we started something called Chavrei HaSiyum. Chavrei HaSiyum means the friends of the Siyum. And they're people who are learning. We have about 9,000 or 10,000 people already signed up that are learning something, saying, I'm going to finish something for the Siyum. So that's called the Chavrei. And the second program is called Masmidei. Masmidei is for children. And the idea being is that you as a child, you're very chashuv. You don't have to wait 20 years till you can learn Daf Yomi as an adult. You can start learning something now.
Right.
So we have 35,000 children involved in this program called Masmidei. And one of the Siyumim, at the Siyum, we're going to make a dual Siyum. There's going to be Siyum on Shas, of course, but there's also going to be a Siyum on Mishnayos for all those who finish Mishnayos as part of the Masmidei. And then we have something which we just launched last week called Torasi. Torasi is a platform where you can go online. It's similar to the charity platform, except you're learning Daf. You're learning Blat. So the person has, when Meir Shapiro, this is very interesting. He was once asked by his Talmidim, we'd like to get you a birthday present. What would you like us to get you? He said, I'd like you to get me Shas. I want everybody in the yeshiva to learn a different Masechta, and together you'll finish Shas.
Oh, wow.
That's what he said. So, which was, it must have taken them a back. I can imagine that moment,
We can't buy that.
yeah, right. We sort of thought like maybe a safer, So they finish Shas. So the idea being is that you can go, there'll be a platform where you can go online and everybody can, put in their daf. There'll be reminders. And let's say a person has a yard site or somebody's unfortunately not well, wants a refuah shlema or a birthday, everybody learns together. That's going to be called Tarasi, and that just launched. Probably you'll be hearing more about that as we come forward. Then there's a program called the Yom HaShishi, which is this is very interesting. Every Friday we have a different Rav who gives a shmooze about the 7 dafim that were learned that week. And we send it out on Erev Shabbos, and he ties in what happened during those 7 daf to the Parsha. So,
it's a chazara
it's a chazara, but it's at the same time it's giving you Dvar Torah. It'll be Yom HaShish. You can see it if you go online to the Agudath website. You might want to poke around Siyum.com a little bit. It'll give you a flavor for it. But there are a lot of programs that are being started by Agudath itself as a result of the excitement of the daf. In addition to all the many programs that everybody's starting as part of the excitement of the daf.
It's funny because I know there's a lot of spin-off programs that come out of Daf Yomi. There's a Daf Shavua program that I know some shuls have. There's an Amud Yomi.
Right.
I know that there's a Mishnah Berurah Yomi that exists.
Right.
So it's nice that the Agudath is also getting into that where they're throwing in, we'll have all these other programs as well.
Right, so we're trying to increase it using it. And all this has come from it's an amazing thing. When you think about it, one of the videos that they've made is called, What One Man Can Accomplish. It's like just amazing. Rameir Shapiro stood up 96 years ago. It's historically, that's not that long. And it's something that the entire Jewish people is benefiting from. Millions of people are benefiting from it at all levels because of one man's idea that came up less than a century ago.
All right. Well, Rabbi Becker, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful talking to you.
And good luck on the Siyum and Mazel Tov.
Thank you.
My thanks to Rabbi Labish Becker of the Agudath. The timing of the Siyum certainly allows for those New Year's resolutions to focus on the Daf Yomi this year. Just don't let it go by the way of last year's weight loss resolution. There's still some time to purchase tickets to this year's event through thesiyum.org. Siyum spelled Siyum. There you can also find out more information about the history of the Siyum as well as sign up for updates. To all those who are finishing Shas this time around, we send you a well-deserved Mazel Tov. To all those just starting out, much hatzlach on your journey. And to everyone listening, as always, Kol Tov.
The Jewish Living Podcast is produced by Sroli Pikus. Our theme song is The Band by A.B. Rottenberg from Journeys 4. You can email the show at jewishlivingpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on Twitter at Jewish_living. The Jewish Living Podcast is recorded in conjunction with the Queen's Jewish Link.